In this video, I will show you how I made this Viking shift that I wear under my apron dress. It's made from linen, which makes it very comfortable to wear. I hope you will find this helpful and entertaining. This dress is very easy to make and great for beginners, since it's not very fitted. I sewed mine by hand, but you can of course also make it by machine. You have to draft your own pattern, but it's very simple. I'll show you how. So this is how your measurements are going to turn into the pattern pieces, and the way you're going to get your pattern pieces is as follows. First, for the front and back pieces, you are going to measure first the width of your torso at the widest point, which tends to be the bust for most women. And this measurement you're going to divide by 2, and it is going to be the width of your front and back pieces. And then for the length of it, you are going to measure from your shoulder and down to where you want your dress to end. And that's going to be the length of it. And you're going to cut 2 of these pieces, and they're going to be sewn together at shoulders, so your head is going to pop up here. Then for the sleeves, you are going to measure your arm at the widest point, the bicep, which is going to become the width of your sleeve, and then the length of your arm, which is going to become the length of your sleeve. And you are once again going to cut 2 of these, and then they are going to be sort of folded into a tube-like shape, which is going to be your sleeve, and it's going to be sewed on to the front and back pieces and the little underarm gusset. So for the godets, you are going to start by figuring out the height of them, which you can do by either measuring from where you want them to start and then measure down to the bottom of the dress. That would make a lot of sense to do it like that, but I find it easier to measure where you don't want it to be, so from the shoulders and down to where you want them to start, and then subtract this measurement from the overall length of the dress to get your godets. So once you have the height of them, you can decide on the width, and there's no set way to do this. For me, what ended up dictating the width of them was the amount of fabric that I had. You can either cut your godets in one piece, like so, and I think this is called an isosceles triangle, where these angles are the same and this one is whatever. You can either cut it like that, or you can cut it out in 2 separate right-angled triangles and then seam them together to create one isosceles triangle. And this is what I did because it saves on fabric. And if you do it like this with the right-angled ones, you can cut them out from rectangles. Cut them diagonally, and then fold them over so that they lie back to back like so, and seam them up. And lastly, for the gussets that are going to be under the sleeves, you are going to just cut 2 squares. I made mine 10 by 10 centimeters, and I think that's going to be a fair fit for most people, but you can make it smaller or larger as you want to. It just has to be a square. So cut 2 of these, 1 for each sleeve. Sorry if I went too far out of frame. So while you see me cut my fabric out, I'll explain a few things to you. Firstly, I sewed all of my seams with running back stitches and 1 centimeter seam allowance. Once all my seams were in place, I finished all the raw edges by filling them. Bernadette Banner has a great in-depth video about this method that you can check out if you want. I will leave a link to it in the description box below. I'll also leave a link to this super handy document about sewing techniques found on extant garments from the Bronze Age to the early medieval times. It lists ways of sewing, hemming, finishing edges and decorating with thread if constant running back stitches and felt seams aren't your jam. And they also list the garments the techniques were found on. I begin by sewing the underarm gusset. I line up one side of the square gusset with the sleeve and stitch them together. When I made the first seam, I made sure to start and stop 1 centimeter from the edge, since this is the seam allowance for the next seam. If I had kept on sewing, the gusset would end up looking crooked, which happened when I made my mock-up. So after consulting a YouTube video by Morgan Donna, I got the technique right. I will leave a link down below. Then I line the next side of the gusset up with the opposite side of the sleeve. The gusset has to sit like a rhombus under the arm, not like a square. Then I sew it down like I did the first seam. When you get to the end, make sure you overlap the other seam with 1 stitch to be sure you don't get any gaps. This is what it looks like when the gusset is sewn in. Then I sew down the length of the sleeve. Again, I make sure to overlap 1 stitch to avoid getting a gap in my sleeve. And I repeat the process for the other sleeve. Then I sew the shoulder seams. I made mine 10 centimeters on my mock-up and it was fine, but in this much heavier linen I didn't like how small they were, so I decided to sew them 5 centimeters broader once the whole thing was finished. Then I set the sleeves. This wasn't a big deal since the side seams were still open, so there weren't any issues with matching a sleeve to an armscye. But I still pinned it to keep everything from scooching around. Then I sewed up my triangular godays. I matched up the sides running on the straight grain and sewed them together. And then I sewed the godays to the front and back panels. Once the godays were sewn in, I only needed to finish the very short side seams. Again, it's important to begin and end by overlapping 1 stitch to avoid gaps. Now the structure of the dress was done and I could begin finishing. In this clip I had actually put a wooden sword into the sleeve to avoid accidentally sewing it shut. After many hours of this, I could hem the sleeves and the hem. And at last I faced the neck opening with fabric salvage from the scraps. I made my neckline to just be a slit down the front, but anything goes here really. My facing is a bit broad considering I cut it on the straight grain, but I ended up cutting it smaller to make it follow the neckline more easily. And that concludes the making of this dress. It looks great on its own or all dressed up with an overdress, a hood and useful accessories. I hope you enjoyed watching.